Okay, so today is Saturday, December 22nd, 2018. And today, as we're just about into the holiday season, with its emphasis on the spirit of giving, the Teisho will at least touch upon that. Um, Next Saturday, of course, will be our last Teisho and Doksan of 2018. After that, we'll have Jukai, New Year's Eve. So the holiday season, of course, has this very deep emphasis on the spirit of giving. But as we all know, it can also be a sad time with its recognition of loss, remembrance, lack. In certain situations, it kind of gets put in your face at the end of the year. Dysfunctional family issues. So again, it's the best of times and the worst of times to recontextualize Dickens. To celebrate the season as Zen practitioners, we remember that in the midst of life's realities and difficulties, there is an intrinsic gift that all beings, which means including us, received ages ago. This intimate reality is embodied in the image of the Bodhisattva of compassion of Avalokiteshvara, with her 11 heads and 1,000 hands, each hand with an open eye in the palm. There is a wonderful koan on this. It is Hekiganroku, Blue Cliff Record, case number 89. Of course, the Hekiganroku or Blue Cliff Record, Pian Lu in Chinese, Hekiganroku Japanese, is the second central koan collection we work on after the Wumen Kwan or Mumonkan in Japanese, the Gateless Barrier. This, of course, follows the introductory or initial koans, Mu and the sound of a single hand, and then the 50 to 60 or so introductory koans, which are never formally presented in a book. We don't start the books of koans till we get to the Wumen Kwan. Again, the Hekiganroku follows that and was put together about 1,000 years ago in China by the Zen master Shuido, Secho in Japanese, and refined and expanded about 60 years after first being introduced by another master, Wan Wu, or Engo in Japanese. It's quite stunning to realize the responses, of course, have been passed down via oral tradition for 1,000 years. And hopefully, unlike the old telephone game, where when it starts at one end, comes out completely different at the other, oral traditions actually have a longevity that's almost immeasurable and incalculable and astonishing to those of us who were raised in literate cultures. There is more evidence, in fact, that oral traditions among indigenous peoples easily and accurately go back over 10,000 years. I was just looking into a book on this. I just started. I don't remember the title, but it spoke about Aborigine peoples of Australia who've been there for at least 60,000 years, which means they traveled in part by boat 60,000 years ago to get there, even though there were island hoppings involved. Have stories about a place that was a plain, and they refer to it as the arm or of the land. In other words, it was a point sticking out. Well, that point's been underwater ever since the end of the Ice Age, when the sea levels rose, which means their oral tradition goes back more than 10,000 years, and it's accurate. Scientists are only now confirming that there was indeed a spit of land, a point, sticking out there, where their stories have remembrance. So our oral tradition in Zen that is, responses in the Doksan room between teacher and student, responses to the koans that indeed are written down, or even the ones that are not, that are simply oral tradition, as the introductory koans, have been passed on for over 1,000 years orally, functioning, alive. It's a wonderful thing. So here's the case. Yunyen's hands and eyes. Yunyen, ungon in Japanese, as Dawu, dogo in Japanese. How does the Bodhisattva of great compassion use all those many hands and eyes? Dawu answered, it's like someone in the middle of the night reaching or groping behind their head for their pillow. Yunyen said, I understand, or I get it. That's what Dogen translates that as in the Shobogenzo. Dawu said, how do you understand it? Yunyen said, the whole body is hand and eye. Cleary's translation for this says, all over the body are hands and eyes. Dawu said, that's very well expressed, but it is only 80% of the answer. Yunyen said, how would you say it, elder brother? Dawu said, throughout the body are hands and eyes. So, a little background to the koan. Yunyen was Dongshan's teacher. He brought the great Dongshan, originator of the Soto Kado school, to realization of the teaching of the inanimate. Dongshan asked Yunyen, who hears the teaching of the inanimate? Yunyen said, it can be heard by the insentient. Dongshan asked, do you hear it, master? Yunyen said, if I heard it, then you would not hear my teaching. Dongshan answered, that being the case, then I do not hear your teaching. Yunyen replied, you don't even hear my teaching. How could you hear the teachings of the insentient? Yunyen's response opened Dongshan to very clear awakening. The gata he wrote to express his understanding goes like this. Wondrous, wondrous. The teaching of the inanimate is inconceivable. If you listen with your ears, you won't understand. If you hear the sound with your eyes, then you'll know. To recall Yunyen's biography, for 20 years he labored in conditions not working for him. Then he went to another teacher and things really opened up. How free he became through continuous practice, even after 20 years of not getting it. We can take encouragement from this for sure. He kept at it. His 20 years of working without realization must have been hard. We can see his character in his continuing and in his moving to conditions in which his practice could blossom. Now, Dawu was also an important and steadfast teacher. Here's part of Case 55, Hekiganroku, to give us a taste of his Zen. One day, Dawu, accompanied by his disciple Chi Wan, went to pay his condolences at the house of a man who had just died in the neighborhood of their temple. Qian Wan, tapping the coffin, said, alive or dead? Dawu said, I won't say alive, and I won't say dead. Qian Wan said, why won't you say? Dawu said, I won't say. On their way home, Qian Wan said, teacher, if you don't tell me, I will hit you. Dawu said, you may hit me if you like, but I won't say. Qian Wan struck Dawu. Later, Dawu passed away. Qian Wan went to Xishuang and brought up the foregoing story. Xishuang said, I won't say alive, and I won't say dead. Upon these words, Qian Wan had a realization. Wow, that was very drastic territory to strike one's teacher he had to leave the temple because the other monks would have probably beaten him up. These were rough days. Went against everything to strike one's teacher. And yet, Qian Wan was so concerned about the matter of life and death. He had to have an answer. He meant it. He struck his teacher. He was that serious. He had a fire in his belly. Many people practice like that today. Having to know why we're born, why we must die, what is life, what is death. It burns, it hurts. How many find that in themselves? Well, to tell you the truth, there does come a moment in every life. It might be on your deathbed, but it comes to everyone. And imagine how Qian Wan must have felt when Dao Wu passed away. His teacher was gone. He had struck his teacher, had been forced to leave. And yet that question was still burning. And Dao Wu, wow, you may hit me if you like, but I won't say. He too meant it all the way down. No kidding around. Now, to get back to love and to a functioning Zen practice, we might say that we have three main guiding archetypes. The first is the Buddha, sitting through all of Mara's attacks beneath the Bodhi tree, confirming realization when he glanced at the morning star. When we walk to our mat and bow at our chosen place, we are like the Buddha taking his seat beneath the Bodhi tree. Now we too sit at the axis mundi, center post of the world. Whatever happens, whatever arises, we will sit solidly right there. That myth, that image, and that experience are renewed every time we sit in silence in the Zendo. This is the realization aspect of practice, the ground of it all. The second is Manjushri, swinging his sword. Here is the work of practice, of our encouragement to keep making our effort to go against the ancient habitual flow of thoughts, habits, dreams, the moment by moment effort of waking up. So we count this breath, experience this breath, raise the point of this koan. Manjushri, swinging the sword, is the patron Bodhisattva of the Zendo. With good reason, he or she embodies the work aspect of practice, the how-to of it all, as well as the realization aspect. They're not separate. The third is that of the great Bodhisattva of compassion, with 1,000 hands, Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva of endless, limitless, unimaginable, functioning compassion. Not compassion that sits there, functioning compassion. This image expresses what the core experience and the constant work of attention have opened. It is the point, we might say, of continually dropping attachment to self-centeredness in Zazen and expressing this in our life. Avalokiteshvara means hearer of the cries of the world, is the female Kannon in Japan, Guanyin in China, and the male Chenrezigs in Tibet, all forms of the greatly compassionate one, embodying wisdom's compassion, compassion's wisdom. Tara, or the Savioress in Tibet, is said to have emerged from a teardrop from the eye of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, or from the eye of the Buddha Amitabha, or Amida. She is the essence of purest compassion. In ancient Japan, the 1,000-armed and 11-headed form of the Bodhisattva of compassion, known as Senju Kannon. We have such a one in the shrine room, And in the Zendo over to the left, you'll see a Tibetan Nepalese form of the thousand-armed Avalokiteshvara. Senju Kannon was held to be especially sacred. The Lotus Sutra has a whole chapter dedicated to revealing the miraculous saving virtue of calling on the Bodhisattva of compassion in times of danger and trial. This is the activity of realization, to be present wisely and compassionately engaging with everything from the selfless ground of our nature. The Shurangama Sutra says that by going deep into his practice of who is hearing, the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara realized freedom in the intimacy of enlightenment. In that realization, he spontaneously vowed to save all beings endlessly throughout limitless space and limitless time. A Buddhist legend says that he worked hard to fulfill this great vow, and after eons of dedicated work, had actually emptied all the hells. Then he was overwhelmed to find that in only a minute all the hells were completely filled up again. 2 hands and 1 head would not be enough. Out of his great failure, his head split into 11 heads, so he could look in all directions. His arms split into 1,000 arms, each with an open eye in the palm. Now he could reach wisely and effectively into any realm to save any suffering being. The eye in the palm is crucial. Without wisdom's open eye, compassion could be mere sentimentality and easily create a path to hell, paved with 1,000 good intentions. I will save all others could also easily be an ego trap. But now, with all these hands and eyes, with prajna, non-dual wisdom, he or she could get down to the endless work. Compassion is not a thought, nor is it the injunction, I should be kind. It is not an effort of will, not note to self, be more compassionate. Try it. Good luck. Compassionate activity is the Bodhisattva's whole being to do whatever is needed for the sake not just of the righteous, but the unrighteous, for horses, slugs and worms, spiders, sparrows, eagles, vultures, lambs and tigers, paramecium and amoeba. How does the Bodhisattva actualize his or her great vow? How does he or she make real that deepest, innate, most intimate commitment to free, endless living beings from sorrow and suffering? Compassion is not, I will help you. Compassion is wisdom, hence those open eyes in the palm of every hand. It is not simply a feeling. It is action, not forced. It arises when we get out of the way. The Bodhisattva with 1,000 hands is an inconceivable presentation of boundless, unsentimental, selflessly functioning L-O-V-E. This is how Zen Buddhism presents the core of our practice, but not just for once a year, not just for the holiday season, but as something to be worked at, practiced, realized, and ultimately lived throughout the years of one's life, moment by moment. Not that we can always do it. Not that it necessarily comes easily, but we work at it. And not that we ever can know this love fully, but we work at it. And not that it is a constant Herculean labor, a drag, something we're supposed to do. Rather, we find it at times directing us in our life and work as we get more and more out of the way, letting old self-centered habitual attachments to thoughts of body and mind come to life, be recognized, and fall away. Our work is not about gaining, but getting out of the way of what's always been here from before our parents were even born. We don't gain 11 heads and 1,000 hands. We get out of the way and find, if we persist, that they are our real nature. Life skills we never knew we had arise, called forth by live situations. The paradox is that it is already our nature, yet at the same time, it is a lifetime's work to really actualize it. And it's not literal. The Dalai Lama does not have marks on his back where his 1,000 arms were attached, which has been held by some in a weird literalization of the belief that he is the rebirth or incarnation of Avalokiteshvara. He is, but not like that. Our Zen practice is not about making ourselves or becoming or being anything special. It is about this very question. How does the Bodhisattva use all those hands and eyes? Really? How? Dogen turns that around and says, how do all those hands and eyes use the Bodhisattva? Our job is not simply to gain our bit of peace, but to actualize an ordinary life of practice realization, where as maturing human beings with jobs, families, issues, we can function less self-centeredly for family, friends, environment, nation, planet, and all beings. How? Do we know how we raise our hand? How we blink or digest a meal? Do we know how we hear sounds, see colors, think thoughts, taste tastes? We are a hand reaching for a pillow in the night, in a dark cloud of unknowing, as one Christian mystic termed it. This is our life. Seeing is acting if we don't suppress the activity that arises. Let's accept from the start that this work of maturing is a lifetime's work and is never complete. Even the Buddha to be is said, even the Buddha is said to be only halfway there. Even the Buddha, the fully awakened one, completely realized, still had to leave his new comfort zone of perfect realization and peace to walk the dusty roads, doing his best to embody the way and help others. His way of maturing was to get up, keep going, and help others realize what they already had in equal measure with him, but just didn't know it. Is reaching back for a pillow in the night any different than raising kids, going to work, buying groceries, or answering the phone? Our whole life is a series of opportunities to allow the self to become porous, a chance to evolve further and awake to greater intimacy, and to express that realization as our life. Zen Master Dogen, in a famous section of Shobogenzo, Eye of the Treasury of the True Dharma, 1,000 years ago, well, 13th century, so almost 1,000 years ago. The Genjo, well, 800 years ago. The Genjo Koan, the section I'm talking about, actualizing the fundamental point, lays it out clearly. He says, to study the way is to study the self. To study the self, to truly study the self, is to forget the self. self do you find? What self are you talking about? To forget the self is to drop clinging to one's own body and mind, and drop clinging to the bodies and minds of others. To drop attachment, leave all traces of clinging to a habitual concept of my body and my mind, is to be enlightened by all things. All things step in. And this traceless enlightenment of deepening intimacy continues endlessly. Endlessly means even Shakyamuni is only halfway there. Endlessly. Endlessly. That's unimaginable. To forget the self is not to suppress or ignore the self. Zen is not fundamentally about learning new ideas, though we may learn terms like Zendo, Doksan, Teisho, and Bodhisattva in the course of our practice. Zen is the practice, the breath, the ethical commitments, the questions. What is this very self that seeks to know itself, that learns? Where is it? If we pay attention, if we keep at it, we begin to see that our sorrow is that we live in a dream, thinking ourselves irrevocably separate from other dreaming selves. Of course, in a sense, provisionally, this is so. Yet, this is ultimately a limited, delusive view causing endless suffering, the root cause of war, environmental destruction, and the whole shopping list of egotism that results from such a felt, experienced separation, an inability to live intimately with stars, bugs, friends, parents, children, mountains, rivers on this great wide earth. Dropping self-centeredness opens a gateless gate. Then Avalokiteshvara, hearer of the cries of the world, can begin to use those 1,000 wise hands to apply balm to open wounds, pour water on thirsty plants, employ rope to tie up raging egotism, swing a sword to cut off countless self-centered, unconscious habits. How does the Bodhisattva know how to use all those hands and eyes? To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to stop putting the demands of the self onto everyone and everything, freeing others from ourselves, as well as releasing birds to the air, bugs to the soil, snow to the winter, flowers to the spring. It is counting this breath. 1, 2, 3. It is experiencing this breath. It is questioning this koan until there is only absorption in this koan, nothing else. Forgetting the self, eyes open, hands do what they're called to do. Or if you choose, don't forget the self. Hold as tight to it as you can. See if it is really as solid as we so often seem to believe. Try to find it. Try. Do your best. Search and search. What do you find? Where is myself? Is all there is hands and eyes? Zen Master Dogen, in his section on this koan of the Shobogenzo, Eye of the Treasury of the True Dharma, his master work from around 1200 AD, lost for the next 500 years, again turns that around and asks, how do hands and eyes use all those bodhisattvas? Yunyan said, I get it. But what is there to get? If we're whole and complete from the start, as the Buddha proclaimed upon his great enlightenment, wonder of wonders, all beings are Buddha, that is, fully endowed, already fully endowed with all wisdom and compassion, how much more whole and complete can we become? Yet, if this is true, if the Buddha wasn't a fool or a liar, why don't we know that we're this whole and complete? What's wrong with us? If this is who we are, why do we have to work so hard to realize it? That question gave Dogen himself no peace, and that no peace opened up his path to great peace. What is the relation of seeing to doing, of insight to action, of zazen to our complex lives? What is the relation of your sitting here quietly to your life? Is it our aim to be quiet? Or is that just the beginning of being able to do what? It's like reaching back for a pillow in the night, says Tao Wu. And what about those hands and eyes? Where are your eyes? Where are your hands? What are they doing? Are they all over the body? Throughout the body? Would those two things be different? Are they the same? And what's that? You've had your say, but it's only 80% of it. What's that mean? Is it a put down? Is there a real point in any of this? Or are those old guys just being verbally sharp, quick, and clever? Is that it? This is just a bunch of words? A bunch of clever repartee? What's going on here? If we're not lost in our heads, when a neighbor slips on the ice, our hand reaches out to steady her. If a ball is overthrown, before a child runs out into the street to grab it, we catch it and throw it back. This is our life. This is the so-called point of practice. Being less there, wherever that somewhere else is. We are more here. Being more here, we can see what is and appropriately do or not do. How does the Bodhisattva use all those hands and eyes? Who is the Bodhisattva? Where can the Bodhisattva be found? Stay with the practice. Stay with the question. When the Bodhisattva wakes in the night and reaches back for that pillow, you'll be able to hand it over yourself. Here you go, love. Ripeness, to quote the bard, is all. Happy holiday season. We'll stop here.